it's great to have all this data. It's the most, big data is the most valuable commodity in the world now. But it's how do we communicate that and translate that into actionable ways, things that we can actually action.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Andy North. I'm joined today by Jacob Stanley, General Manager and SEO Specialist at StudioHawk. Jacob, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for
So tell us a little bit about StudioHawk and what are some of the exciting things you're working on right now?
StudioHawk is a dedicated SEO specialist company based in Australia. We're actually Australia's largest now, which is pretty cool, purely because we just focus on one thing, it's SEO and nothing else. So we don't do copywriting, web development, social media marketing, we just do SEO. So we want to be the best at one thing. But yeah, world domination's what we're focused on now. We're actually starting an office in London in August, so that's pretty exciting, and we believe the best is in London. So if we want to play on a world stage, we definitely got to be, with all the best. So that's pretty exciting stuff for us.
We talked earlier about SEO in other languages such as Japanese and Chinese, and apparently it's an untapped market.
Yeah, especially for Australia. I mean, SEO in general in Australia is an untapped market. Like, if you can compare it to the US and UK, it's the skill level here is, you'd be surprised. Like, we're not even scraping the surface. The opportunity that lays in Australia is massive, and we're capitalizing on it huge for our clients, giving them massive opportunities. So I think it's a lot of fun because it's kind of like a new, emerging market for Australia.
What are some of the technical challenges or opportunities that your clients have come to you with?
The most recent one's probably JavaScript. That's been over last year, that's been really a changing sort of area. You've got all different types of way of doing it. And I mean, I heard someone actually say, another specialist say, is JavaScript the devil? Because it's just really hard because it can break quite easily. And if it's not very clean and not easily crawlable, Google defers and actually decides I'll come back later. And then all of a sudden that page is not indexed, and that, is a huge loss to a company.
Is search no longer objective? Do you see it as a way for you to step aside or set yourself apart from the competition? Yeah,
look, I definitely think so. I think search is changing so much compared to what it used to. It used to be pretty easy, but now that with personalization as well, Google's doing that really, really well. I think it kind of takes a life of its own, which is really cool, whereas it's not a pay-to-play system. I mean, in a way it is, but it's very organic. Once that ball starts rolling, it kind of does it itself. And when you've got personalization and a schema that's coming up, featured snippets as well, it's really becoming, predictive as well, which is really cool. So Google knowing what you want before you know you want it, it kind of makes your life a little bit easier. It's still in its early stages, but it's progressing really fast. And I think that's a really exciting space.
Do you see any data privacy issues anymore? I mean, we've got GDPR obviously in the EU, and I know there's certain generations that feel strongly about their data, but I think, do you see that perhaps that's changing a bit?
Yeah, I think, especially in Australia, there's a lot of, security isn't taken seriously. It's starting to take a form with all the new legislation that's come out. I think it's starting to take it really seriously, but in a worldwide scale, yes, security is taken really seriously, and good. That's a really good thing, because now that we're getting all this data, and it's great to have all this data. It's the most, big data is the most valuable commodity in the world now. But it's how do we communicate that and translate that into actionable ways, things that we can actually action. And now that we're getting that kind of power that we can do that, I think it's really important that privacy is, respected in that sense.
Do you think it's taken for granted now? They just sort of assume that there's built-in security and they're getting value for the data exchange?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of stuff like with the plugins. With the GDPR coming out, there's a lot of plugins with WordPress that were, basically selling data to third parties anonymously. And that was a lot of people probably didn't know about that. A lot of developers generally know, and we know, but it's not something that people really take seriously until the GDPR came out. Now they do. So I think that's really important, because people don't know their data is being sold to, or their customers' data. There's trust there, and if you lose that, you can kind of lose your business and your trust from your customers and loyalty. So
your team probably works with a lot of CMSs, and given that you mentioned WordPress is now roughly a third of the entire web, do you have any preferences on CMSs? Do you see them starting to consolidate a bit?
I don't have a preference. I think there's a lot of new ones coming out now, which is interesting. But our job is not to have a preference. I guess it's more translating what the client needs and making sure it gets indexed on search, right? Although I've grew up with WordPress, so I understand it really well, but at the same time, it's pretty easy to a certain degree. I like new CMSs because it's interesting to see how they're kind of the way they're working. A lot of the time, there's sort of the young CMSs that have a lot of learning to sort of be Googlebot friendly. That's a bit challenging. You've got some CMSs out there that I just won't touch because it just defies logic, and Google just can't index it. So yeah, I think it really just depends on if we can work with it, and if it's Googlebot friendly, and how efficient can we be as well, because it's going to cost you money. If it's a CMS that's new and really complicated, then that's going to take more of our time and cost you more money. So that's another thing I think people tend to forget to factor in. But regardless, our job is to help your website get indexed no matter the CMS. So
it's really not one size fits all. It's whatever their particular goals are from a business standpoint and what would work best for them.
Exactly. Like there's a different CMS for whatever your industry or your purpose is. Like if you're a massive e-commerce store, you'd probably be more lean towards Magento, or Shopify, or even BigCommerce. Shopify is great for starting out as well for e-commerce. WordPress is great as well. It really just depends on what your needs are. With WordPress, you've got so many plugins that you can add in, and it's not really that expensive. Whereas Shopify, you pay a monthly fee generally for the apps, or you get a free period to start off with, and can get quite expensive. But yeah, it really just depends on, you get transaction fees as well. Like if you're doing large quantities, it can get quite expensive. So which one's the best provider? So there's a lot of variables at play, but I think as long as you know what you're getting and what the pros and cons are, it's a lot easier to make a more informed decision.
Are we seeing the death of the website? Do you see it going away, or does it still have a role?
No, it'll definitely have a role. I don't see it going away at all. You still see majority of transactions. Yes, they are starting to go mobile, but you still see a lot on desktop, especially I think it is starting to progress and change. Obviously, mobile is now responsible at the end of, I think it was 2018, 70% of users now are using mobile, which is huge. That happened really, really quick. And then Google going mobile first indexing, that's really pushed it as well.
Are you seeing a stronger role for AI and even perhaps blockchain in SEO? And where do you see that going and evolving?
Yeah, I definitely am seeing a lot of AI. Blockchain, I haven't really, it's coming back to that security type of thing. I think blockchain's it's incredible technology, but I just don't see how that's, integrated with search as much as it could be, but we are starting to see that kind of, merge in, but not as much as it should. But AI definitely, Google's whole algorithm is AI based, and it's getting really, really smart with the predictive analytics as well, knowing what we want to know, knowing what we would want before we want it. I don't know if you guys have seen Google Discover. That's pretty incredible, pushing articles based on your search history. And it's pretty accurate.
Even down to the predictive text on your email.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really cool one. I love that feature. Predictive text on email is really, really cool. A little bit scary for some people, but still really efficient if you know how to use it quickly.
Given that e-commerce has blown up, obviously, do you still see a role for brick and mortar retail?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think Google's done a huge push on it. Even Bing has done a huge push on it. You've also got Apple. They've always really tried to push hard on it as well. You've got Google My Business. You can have your own brick and mortar business on Google, and Google's putting so much resources into it, and they've got some really big plans actually coming, which is, I think they're going to announce over the Google I/O. But I hope they do. But basically, being able to have your actual products on your listing, and then if people are searching in your local area, they can recommend your brick and mortar business based on proximity. That's pretty cool. Woolworths have been doing it, and it's been pretty successful, I've heard. So I think that'd be really great to see that for smaller businesses as well. Your mum and dad businesses having access to that kind of stuff can really make a huge difference. I like how Google kind of gives, Apple does it as well, but gives sort of the smaller, mum and dad businesses a lot of opportunity to play with the bigger players. I think that's going to be really, really big because there's so many of them, right? Having access to that and making it so simple, I think, is going to really change brick and mortar businesses. And I've seen businesses, start and be within 3 months. They're really leveraging that, and they're just going nuts.
Are there any books, blogs, or podcasts that you're reading right now that you want to share?
There's one book that I absolutely love, and I try and read it every year, but it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's a great book. Probably the only book you need to read in business, I think. But yeah, that if you haven't read it, seriously read it. It's like, I don't know if you've read it yourself, but
it's been a while.
It's definitely something that, I think really basic stuff that we kind of forget. But really relevant now more than ever, I think. But yeah, grab a copy. It's only $15, so
nice.
It'll change your world.
Any blogs or podcasts that you like?
Yeah, I mean, the best SEO blogs. I love Search Engine Roundtable. That's a great one by Barry Schwartz. That's really, really good. I mean, every morning you get your lowdown of what's happening in the search community. Another one, there's Traffic Think Tank. If you've got the money, it's a Slack group, but you just got the best of the best all talking about SEO. Even things like link building and social media marketing tactics. And it's pretty expensive, but it's really good stuff in there. They're probably my two favorites. Another one would be Search Engine Journals, another really good one. There's a couple of people that I follow on Twitter as well. It's really good. I think Twitter's pretty awesome for that. Just being able to follow a lot of people in the space. But yeah, definitely get on Search Engine Roundtable. That's pretty good if you're in search. That's really good stuff.
My guest today has been Jacob Stanley, General Manager and SEO Specialist at StudioHawk. Jacob, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.